All right, so in this video, I want to go over how I think you can best set yourself up to enter the quantitative developer job market. And for context, this is the end of 2025. Tech job market is not doing the best. And it's, of course, flooded with highly qualified talent, people with a lot of experience from places like Microsoft who are, believe me, considering pivots to places like quant dev, even from like traditional SWE roles. So that's your competition. And I have the video broken down into two parts: building the skill set and landing the job. I think people focus on this landing the job aspect a bit too much. And by landing the job, I mean optimizing resume, um, grinding leak code. These are important, but I think people stress them too much. Really, what I think you should focus most of your time on is building a legitimate and good skill set that's going to set you apart in and of itself so that getting these interviews, you know, is not so difficult, which again, right now, it really is. So, building the skill set, I have this section here called skill set philosophy. And bear with me, this is kind of a very cringe LinkedIn coded term, but what you want to develop is what is called a T shaped skill profile. Let me zoom in a bit here. You see, this shape here is a T, obviously. And what does this diagram represent? So, on the x axis are different topics within your niche of quant dev. On the y axis is your depth of knowledge in that particular niche. So, this person would be an expert in high performance computing. They're proficient in numerical methods and networking, and they're, decent at ML ops and databases. So this is a T-shaped skill profile. You have a broad range of things that you're close to proficient in, and you have one or two things that you are undeniably an expert in. Now, the reason this is important is because, companies nowadays, because they have, the pick of the litter, it's not hard for them to get people applying. They can look for people who are very good at one thing, yes. And it used to be the case that that would get you a job if you're an expert at one thing. But nowadays, people who are experts at one thing and also pretty good at a bunch of other things, they're much more valuable because, well, for two reasons. One, because they're going to be able to lend a hand in a broad range of things if needed. But two, because if they have this experience in a broad range of things, then you better believe that if they're an expert in high performance computing, they're going to be able to integrate better their solutions in their niche into different parts of the code base for the company, right? So think about it in that sense. It's like maximizing your impact by way of, being able to better distribute the things that you provide to the company that you work for. So that's why this is becoming necessary. Again, bear with the cringy T-shaped name, but yeah, that's what it is. Now, it doesn't have to be these topics. You could imagine you do API design, code optimization, data science, parallel or GPU programming. It could even be something like, KDB really well, right? Proprietary tech. Try to avoid it in general just being a language. Like, try not to have your expertise be quote unquote Java or C++ or Python. It should be a bit more granular than that. It's maybe you're an expert in low level optimization in C++. That's perfectly fine. But don't just say, oh, I am the resident Python expert here. You don't want to be that person, especially with Python. So, yeah. And when you build this skill set, so if you're a younger person, try and think about this. Do, a self check in every few months. Think about, am I actually progressing in a wide range of things, or am I just getting better at one thing and really niching myself into a corner? Which can pay off, but it's much more high risk. So try to make the skill set coherent. And here's another example. So it's similar to the one above. But let's say you're an expert at high performance computing. You're pretty good with numerical optimization, and you're pretty good with data analysis, data pipelines. This type of a skill set would obviously be very useful for a place who's looking to scale up the size and scope of, for example, their derivative pricing engine. And why is that the case? Well, it's the case because you, with this skill set, would obviously be able to handle end to end projects, right? You can pipeline data, you can obtain it from whatever the data source is, clean it. How do you deal with something like, your connection to a database breaking or a WebSocket disconnecting? How do you clean that kind of data? How do you enrich the data? How do you compute signals or things that may be required for the users of your product? Um, you're going to be able to do those things in a scalable manner if you have this experience. You're going to be able to implement pricing algorithms or optimize pre existing pricing algorithms, is probably a more likely realistic scenario, such that they scale to distributed compute that maybe your company has purchased. That's important. And then, of course, with the data experience, you'd be able to generate analytics from the output and try and sell your product as something that is useful to stakeholders or to the desk that you're supporting as a quant dev. All of these things, it may not be immediately obvious how to build one of these coherent skill sets, but I think when you see a couple examples here, it's obvious that, oh, that's a useful skill set that, all lends and sort of pipelines into their main bread and butter. And so you should, as you think about things to add to your repertoire, you should always think about how to build one of those coherent skill sets and make sure the things you're adding to your kit, so to speak, they contribute to the main focus of your skill set. Now, the tough thing, and I acknowledge this, is that if you are new to the space, you don't even know what a coherent skill set is to begin with. And so that's where things like internships or seeking guidance from professionals is going to be very important. So if you can get an internship, obviously that's the ideal scenario. But if you can't, or if you've missed this summer's cycle or something like that, it's already getting a bit late. Um, though you can still find some things. Uh, you should seek guidance from people who are in a job that you would like to see yourself in. So go on LinkedIn, look for a particular type of quant dev job that interests you, and reach out to people, see if they would be up to talk to you for 15 minutes on a call, and come with good questions. Good questions like, it should be obvious what the main thing you need for a job is, but ask them, hey, what are some things that, if I knew this, it would really set me apart for a role like yours? Or what are some things that your specific team is looking to hire for? And, these types of questions, they seem obvious, but I just want to be very explicit and give you some examples of things you could really just go do today and have a better outlook in the future if you kind of follow that advice. Now, being that I'm telling you, you sort of craft your own skill profile, and it's ideal to make it somewhat unique so that you stand out as a unique candidate and you play a numbers game, and eventually someone's going to need a skill set like yours. Um, being that this is the case, I've just provided a bunch of things that you can imagine crafting one of these profiles with. The more things you know, the better. And, of course, the better you are at your key skill, the better as well. But I'm going to dive into the one question that gets asked 24/7 in the quant dev space is, do I need C++? C++ is important, but especially in the YouTube and quant forum and LinkedIn space, people think like every single quant dev is doing nitty gritty low level optimization. And that's not the case. Do your own research. Look up, just go on your favorite job board and type in quantitative developer. You will look at plenty of jobs that are saying uh, only requires experience in Python. So the answer to do I need C++ is no, but you will obviously be limiting yourself. So I recommend you learn C++, especially if you have the time. But if you are pivoting as a Python dev with a lot of experience in things like data pipelines, you could probably land yourself a quant dev job. And this no comes with some caveats. One is obviously that your options are more limited. Whoops. Two is it's extremely easy to fool yourself, especially as someone who has no experience in a production coding setting. So if you're, still in school, or if you're coming from academia, it's very, which I was, so I'm kind of binning myself in this number two. It's easy to fool yourself into thinking you are good at Python when you're not as good as, you really should be. So learning a language like a C++, it's going to reveal whether or not you're good at a language much more easily than something like Python, where you can get by just, LLMs are really good at Python. Pretty much everything is implemented somewhere in Python. You really want to avoid fooling yourself into thinking you are a good developer, unless you really are. And three is that it's hard to find time to pick up skills later on in life. And it's hard to convince someone who is 19 years old of that sometimes. But I promise you, if you are 28, let's say you're a few years into your career and you are a Python based quant dev and you want to learn C++, but now you have a kid and now you have a mortgage and now you have a 45-minute commute back and forth from work and um, you work 8 hours a day and so on or more, right? It's extremely hard to find the time to pick up something like C++ in the way that you need to learn it properly. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of grinding, it takes a lot of really just mental work sitting there and grinding through problems and understanding things. So I am very skeptical that people who go into a Python based job with the idea that they're going to learn C++ later in life, I would be, skeptical that that pans out as you think it will. Of course, you can do it, but just beware of that. Now, if you do C++, one thing, if you've ever watched, for example, Coding Jesus on YouTube here, um, people call in and they do kind of mock interviews, and I'm sure other channels do this, but I've only seen his. And in the comments, when he asks questions about the overhead of some, um, you know, inbuilt data type or some question about different types of pointers, people think everything that is just deep language knowledge, they think that's trivia, they think it's trivial. And I can like not stress to you enough the notion that that's not. If you are choosing to be a C++ dev as a quant dev, those kind of things even a junior should know, even someone who is entering the job market, you realistically should know these things. So don't get into this very toxic mindset of I don't care about the nitty-gritty, especially in the context of C++. So learn the language, learn the standard library, and learn it very well. Learn the API for basically everything in the standard library if you're going to be a C++ dev. And yeah, really can't understate how important that is or overstate how important that is. Now, you could imagine doing, excuse me, a bunch of different things. Profiling and memory management if you're going to be doing very low level optimization. How do you interact with APIs? Do you know how to hook into a WebSocket? Do you know how to expose your code to Python? Do you have any experience with build systems and productionizing your code? That's very important and often overlooked by people who have not yet had a job in the space. And all of these other things. Again, it's kind of you can pick, it's like a la carte. Pick a skill set, the things that interest you and you think you'd be good at, and, build your skill profile here out of them. Now, in terms of Python, I think it's much less negotiable. Deep language knowledge is important, and you would be surprised the number of people that don't have it, despite the ease of acquiring it in Python. But one caveat with Python is that the standard library, at least for quant devs, it's really not the standard library. The standard library is Python plus pandas plus NumPy plus some visualization tools, probably plus some things related to databases, and you can sort of pick and choose them as necessary. But it's really not enough to be a quant dev who knows just base Python really well. So you have to familiarize yourself with at least visualization, hooking into WebSockets, dealing with APIs, databases, vectorizing code, and tabular data. These other things, GPU, just-in-time compilation, distributed compute, and like particular stats packages, that's maybe not as much of a universal, but if you're going to be a Python-based quant dev, for sure, you need these ones that I've just highlighted here. These 5 are pretty much non-negotiable, and deep language knowledge. Now, in terms of miscellaneous skills, you should probably have some familiarization, or some familiarity rather, with most of these. Like you're probably going to need to know some SQL to do, exploratory data analysis. You're probably going to be working with Excel sometimes. It's finance. No one likes it, but it's just comes with the space. I'm not saying you need to be some expert, but you should not be thrown through a loop the first time you hear about the concept of a pivot table, for example. Productionizing your code. Do you know how to do this? Do you know how to write unit tests? Do you know CI/CD? Do you have any familiarity whatsoever with the command line interface? And environment management, these things, all very important. And in general, I think just production level code experience is very overlooked. So try and contribute to some open source repositories. And it's intimidating at first, but it will be much easier if you learn it before getting on the job. Now, in terms of your years in school, so this is your education and pre employment years, education, obviously, double edged sword. You don't need a particular high level degree to get into quant dev. I think you probably need at this point a bachelor's, but you probably don't need a master's and you definitely don't need a PhD. But this is a double edged sword because, that means that it's more accessible to people who don't have those degrees. And so the pool of competition is kind of higher or larger, I should say. And one warning for people who do come from an academic background. So this was me. I am in quant research. I'm not in quant dev, but I've experienced this myself. And this is that academic coding, if you are coding in a research lab, even as an undergrad, it's going to give you the worst coding habits that are like wildly unacceptable. And um, be very wary of this. Very, very few places in academia write good code in the context of like industrial application. They may write good and efficient code and it's very novel, but it's not production level code and it's very far from it. Now, in terms of degree selection, I think it's much more about your skill set, but let's say you want to pick a degree, obviously computer science, computer engineering, something like stats is not bad either, but applied math, electrical engineering, financial engineering is okay too. Physics is good too. I wouldn't, tear yourself too much up about what your degree is in. If you have a degree and you have the skills, then no one's going to care if your degree is in mechanical engineering. Um, Not that that's a particularly bad option, but you will notice I have selected 0 finance degrees because nobody cares if you have a finance degree to get into quant dev at all. And it's probably one of the worst things you could choose. So other than, something which is totally non-technical, like I guess finance is maybe technically STEM, but it's basically like a non-STEM degree in terms of the depth of knowledge that you go into things. So what to do in school? Coursework, you should just take the most advanced levels of courses that you have available to you. So if you're doing something CS related, data structures and algorithms, networking, networking as in the context of software development, parallel, async programming, good options, databases, you should again have some familiarity with how they work, how they are optimized, and at least how to query them. Math related would be statistics. I think linear algebra is pretty important for a lot of quant devs, and numerical optimization, very important for quant devs. Here I mean kind of like optimization theory, right? I don't mean optimizing numerical code. Other things, ML AI, but there are going to be a lot of exceptions there. So it's, again, if it lends well to the skill profile that you are building, then take the course and take the most advanced level that you possibly can. In terms of projects, the number one thing you want to do to demonstrate that you can write production level code is contribute to open source. Go find an issue in a repository. It doesn't have to be some 50,000 star repository, but go find an issue in some repository that you use or maybe that you find interesting. Make the change, submit a PR, and get your code approved. That's the best way to get familiar with the process of writing production level code. And you should focus on projects that demonstrate the deep knowledge in one area. So in the Discord, also shameless plug for the Discord, the link is down below, and I promise I've shared one this time that doesn't expire. Yeah, we had some people, or one person in the Discord, for example, hand rolled his own full C++ deep learning framework. That's like obviously impressive. It shows that you can write skill like a sufficiently large project. It shows that you can think about how to orchestrate that, implement it in a way which makes sense architecturally, and the technical skill there is obviously on display. And that's another thing is the technical depth of your project, right? This is for development. This is not for a research job where the research job projects come in, you care about the originality. You want to show that you can come up with new ideas and implement them. As a quant dev, Technical depth is much more important than the originality of your project. So you could take that same idea, hand roll your own deep learning framework, and provided it's not like you're stealing someone's implementation, that's much more important than coming up with some cool new project. So it doesn't matter if your project has been done, but make your implementation original, not something that you can just copy paste or whip up with an LLM in 2 hours. And your project, you should, your first project could be something quick, but if you want a project to be a line on your resume, it should be, I should look at it and I should say, oh, that took this person a couple months at least. If your thing is, I made a volatility surface plot and I made a streamlit thing and you can drag the plot and, you know, yeah, that's nice, right? But it's really not impressive. It's kind of been beaten to death. So, in terms of internships, next thing, get an internship every single summer that you can. And note that software engineering, so, full disclaimer, get a quant internship if you can, but especially your first couple of years, that's going to be very hard to do. So, if you have the option of doing summer research in a lab or software engineering is much better for quant dev. So do that if possible. Traditional software engineering internships will be much easier to land than a quant related one. So target those. And as a last resort, do some research at, with some group at your school. Apply early. For example, it's late October now. You should already be applying for, so it's late October of 2025. You should already be applying for summer 2026 internships. So the earlier you apply in the cycle, sometimes the easier it is to get a job. Not always, but yeah. And it's also important if you're applying for full time roles, be early there. Then it's really important. Sometimes, like in internships, it's very cycle based and they'll get through all of the applications. But with a job, a full time job, excuse me, I'm kind of getting over a cold here. With a full time job, getting in early in the application process is so important. And then four is leverage your network and job fairs, but that's self explanatory. So that wraps up the, building a skill set section here. Now it's on to landing the job. And I'm not going to go into too much depth here. It could be a subject of a whole nother video, but I want to give you a high level overview. There's no way around it. The job market right now is very tough, but what are the things you actually have control over? And I mean, the answer is really only two things. You have your candidate profile, which is how you look to someone who is going to be making the decision as to whether or not you get hired. And you have control over how well you do in interviews. So, in terms of the candidate profile, here we have the, as of September 16th of this year, 2025, tech employees impacted by layoffs. And the numbers are high. Like, I mean, this looks low, but it's still 200,000 for 2025 projected. So that's pretty rough, right? That's 200,000 people looking for a job and looking ideally for a high paying job. And so everyone would want probably a quant dev role if they can get it, provided they don't have some open AI offer they're sitting on. But you can talk to any quant dev. Tech layoffs have massively increased the competition level here. And this is, these people are your worst enemy. Because they have a lot of experience, they have good places on their resume, and so on. But here's the positive: if you're new to the field, you can take a less than optimal position just to gain some experience to kind of wait out the storm, hopefully, of this job market. Not to say it's going to get better, but it can at least buy you some time and get you some experience. So just consider two high quality candidates. Candidate one is some new CS grad from a state school. They did an internship at a small company. They hand rolled their own deep learning framework, and they have a rich open source contribution history. That's a very solid candidate. Candidate two is a Stanford Master's Computer Science graduate. They have previously worked at FANG and they got laid off, but their prior salary was 225K. They have a bunch of applied ML projects, as well as, they've hit markers at their prior job. And they have a publication in machine learning, maybe at some high level conference. Both of these are good candidates. And one of them is obviously easier to become, right? It's very easy. Well, I won't say very easy, but it's pretty easy to become candidate one here. It is not so easy to become candidate two. So um, leverage the benefit of being a candidate one in this scenario. So both have competence, both have relevant experience, but the first one's much easier to become. And honestly, you have to be real with yourself. Candidate one is going to get paid less and going to have a lower salary expectation. They didn't just come out of a job making 225K plus RSUs, right? They probably came from a summer job making $18 an hour. So use the fact that your background may not be from an Ivy League school with some crazy FANG experience. Use that to help you get into a job that's going to allow you to grow and is not going to see you as just taking a quick job that you're going to leave as soon as you can. That's important. And that's kind of summing it up for this part of the candidate profile. In terms of crafting your resume, it's too broad of a subject, and I think it's really not that hard. So just take a standard resume template, follow the formulaic approach, don't get fancy with it, don't include any crazy graphics, and let your skills speak for themselves. And obviously highlight the key things, but yeah. Now, in terms of the last thing, which again I think people focus on a bit too much, is interview performance. Interview performance is very important, but if you're getting interviews consistently, it's a bit of a numbers game if you grind enough, and you'll get there, I promise you. So avoid giving any excuse to the person who's thinking about hiring you. Don't give them any excuse to remove you from the pool. So in the first round of like a non-technical screening, just use common sense. Avoid red flags. Don't seem like someone who is just going to go there for 1 year and leave. It's expensive to hire people, and it's a pain to hire people. Nobody wants to deal with someone who is coming in to leave 8 months later. So don't have that sort of attitude about you. Don't be weird. That's self-explanatory. If you can help it. I mean, if you can't help it, I don't know. I don't know how to help you, but don't be weird in the interview. Just be like a personable person, right? Don't seem desperate. Don't seem obsessed, but just be kind of a chill person. And here are a couple sample bad answers. So, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And the person says, well, I'm just kind of using this as a stepping stone. I'm really thinking about going to Jane Street after this. Don't say things like that. What appeals to you about the job, and you overstress the pay. Don't do that either. Try and be at least somewhat interested, because you're only going to be miserable if all you care about is the paycheck. I know times are tough out there, that may be you, but try not to make it seem that way. People have it in their mind that like this over honesty is a good thing. It's not a good thing. It doesn't play well, and it will just make you seem rude if you are someone like that. So try not to be like that. Online assessments, this is step 2. So after you pass some usually non-technical screening, you might get an online assessment. This could come first without a non-technical screening, but for most jobs, you're going to get some form of an online assessment. There's a very, very finite pool of questions you can be asked. And, well, I mean, the pool is not finite, but the pool that you will be asked is made up by a very finite number of questions. So 95% of the questions you will see will be more or less copy paste from one of these types of LeetCode, NeetCode, code forces. So if you grind those and you're good at them and you can solve mediums pretty, readily, you're going to get a job eventually, in my opinion. So there's no excuse to be messing these up. Just put in the hours. It's not that hard. And I would recommend, this may, people may see this as not the most moral thing. Use software engineering postings as practice. One, their interviews are at least 2 times easier, in my opinion. You can and the other thing is, software engineering postings are much more abundant, and they're easier to get interviews for because, well, quant dev is harder to get into than software engineering at most places. So use these postings as online assessment practice, because live coding is nothing like coding in the comfort of your own home with no person talking to you, or with no time limit in the case of like a purely online assessment. So really get some practice and you'll get better at them over time. And step three is once you have passed that and you are interviewing, hopefully with people from the team that you're trying to join, this is where a lot of people still throw the interview. And I have talked to some people who have done this and, gone through some kind of scenarios where this is the case. So, live technical interviews, these are not only technical interviews. You are usually going to be talking to someone who is on the team you're planning on joining, or they're maybe adjacent to the team you're going to be joining. And it's as much a personality assessment and a goodness of fit assessment as it is a technical interview. So you need to have your technicals on point, yes, but you also need to be personable. Do not be a know it all. Like if someone tells you something that you didn't know, do not get defensive, do not be obnoxious, and take criticism well and ask questions. And um, ultimately, the thing you want to avoid is seeming hard to work with because a lot of times when you're on the interviewing side, right, you think, oh, I have to nail these technicals. And that is important, doing well on those. But it's very easy to get kind of like frustrated and tense up if you mess something up a little bit. And even if you are a nice guy uh, or girl, even if you're a nice guy, you can seem kind of like rigid and annoying and snippy with people if you're overly focused on the technical. So um, try not to do that if you can. Explain your thought process as you think through things, right? This will give people an idea of are you good at communication? Because as much as the job is about development, it's often about interacting with stakeholders, explaining your solution in a way which is accessible to someone without a coding background. These things are very important and underemphasized in places like the YouTube quant dev space, in my opinion. Um, well, really just the online quant dev space in general. Two, research the team. Like this is important. Have questions for them ready. Ask about, what are some things that would be really useful for this team right now? What are some of the things that you guys are looking to pivot to in the future? Stuff like that. If they're willing to share, that's going to be useful information for you. And just try to be likable and be genuine. So I think if you do these things, it's again really just put yourself in the shoes of the interviewer. The interviewer is presumably, if they're on the team, right? The team's hiring, so the team has more work than the team can currently handle, or else they wouldn't be hiring someone. So you can bet that they might be a little bit stressed right now, and the last thing they want is someone who's going to be hard to work with. So yes, the technicals are necessary, but they are not a sufficient condition for getting the job and you should really focus on being likable and kind of just being a good communicator in general. I think it's important for developers. It's not the most important thing, but it is more important than people give it credit for. And that's kind of the overview for this video. So it's a bit of a long one, but maybe some people have been bored out of this one, but I don't really care. I think I'd rather make a video like this where the people who want the information can really sit through or click around to the relevant parts to them. I would rather do that than rush this out in a 15-minute video or try and split this into 3 or 4 videos to play the algorithm. Not really interested in that. So I just wanted to make a video that's sort of all encompassing for how I think you can, again, best approach this quant dev job market right now. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments down below. Be happy to get back to you. Again, I will post a non-expiring link to the Discord so that you can actually join it if I forget to update the link in 2 weeks. But yeah, that's going to do it for this video. So again, appreciate all the support from everyone, all the kind comments. I appreciate getting your guys' emails when you guys ask questions. I know I'm not the quickest to reply, but I do try to get back to everyone who has a question. So feel free to continue that. But I'm going to sign off for here. Drop any comments if you have any ideas for future videos that you think might be of broad appeal, and I will work on those. So that's going to do it for this video. I will just say thank you guys for watching, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.